this Sunday on Rosemary Barton Live.
It's incredible what's happening. We need that diversification and resilience.
Relationship reset. Ottawa reaches a deal with Beijing as the world's trading system is upended by the U.S. president. What are the risks and the rewards? My Canadian exclusive with Canada's former ambassador to China, Rosemary Barton.
The global environment has fundamentally changed in the last 5 years.
Line of defense with threats to NATO and a rapidly changing world. What are the country's priorities for defending Canada's sovereignty? The Chief of the Defense Staff, General Jenny Carignan, is here.
Stand with the people now or watch the cycle of instability continue.
Growing discontent. Protests in Iran retreat as the regime cracks down. What comes next for the demonstrations? I'll ask Iranian-Canadian human rights advocate Nazanin Afshinjam McKay. It all starts now on Rosemary Barton Live.
Hey, thanks so much for joining us on this Sunday. Mark Carney has secured his first tariff reversal as Prime Minister with what he calls a landmark trade deal with China.
There is much to protect in this relationship and much on which to build and much to be gained. So leveraging our strengths and focusing on areas of alignment, Canada and China can create greater stability, security, and prosperity for both our nations. And to that end, President Xi and I are announcing that Canada and China are forging a new strategic partnership.
The deal will lower Canada's 100% tariff on Chinese-made electric vehicles to just over 6%, and will now allow up to 49,000 EVs into Canada, Chinese EVs. In return, Ottawa expects Beijing to drop canola seed tariffs, a tax that has devastated canola farmers in Canada, from 84% to 15% by March. This brings Canada and China back to measures that were in place a couple of years ago in 2023 and marks a significant de-escalation in years of ongoing tension between the two countries. Rosemary Barton is Canada's former ambassador to China. Nice to see you this morning.
Great to see you, Rosie. Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year to you. I am very interested to get your perspective on this trip, the first one by a Canadian Prime Minister in almost a decade. How important do you think this reset is between Canada and China?
I think it's extremely important. It sounds like it's been a very good trip, both in terms of having a reset, but also quite pragmatic as well, and also setting in kind of the mechanisms to talk about other issues, opportunities and challenges. So I think this is really important. I think it fits very much with the Prime Minister's push that we've got to double our trade outside of the U.S. Over the next 10 years. And that's $300 billion. So I think this is really important.
Canada's decision to implement the tariff, the 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles, was made, as you know, with the Biden administration. The fact that Canada is now moving out of line with U.S. trade policy, especially when it comes to China, are you concerned about a rupture there between Canada and the U.S. in the face of China, or is this what's to be expected in these days?
I think it's the way the world is, if you will, right? I think the Prime Minister had a more eloquent way of saying it, but it's we're just in a very volatile place. And I think it's important that Canada, while recognizing the importance and the need that we have to continue and hopefully increase trade with the U.S., we have to diversify and have the resilience. And I think, you can't count on it, but President Trump's, comments on that were, at least in the short term, positive, right, on that side. But I think it's a matter of we have to follow our interests. Obviously, it's a very difficult, tricky world to navigate. The Greenland situation, is brewing in the background. Yeah. But resilience for us, I think, is very important. And, again, China has been part of the India, the Middle East. We just have to have deeper relationships with these countries and regions.
In your role as ambassador, you, in case people forgot, you were instrumental to the release of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. Knowing what China is capable of, knowing how to manage that, what are your concerns about those parts of the relationship? It's one thing to have a trade and economic relationship. It's another to talk about, human beings and the way that China can react. Do you have concerns around that now?
Well, I think we all do, right, in terms of the using trade as a weapon, so to speak, people and so forth. But I think what's most important is there's actually a relationship. There's actually a dialogue. There are mechanisms. 10 different mechanisms, working groups. It sounds very bureaucratic, but those are very important, have been established. And that includes on the security side. And that, when I was there, that wasn't there. That had broken down. All of our mechanisms had stopped except for ones on climate, and that makes it difficult to deal with issues. So, I think it's a pragmatic, clear-eyed approach, and I feel, especially with the mechanisms, particularly on the security side, that's very important, and I think I think the Prime Minister emphasized that, and I know that had been discussed a lot. So that's how I feel.
When I interviewed the Prime Minister last month, he said that there have to be guardrails for China, when it comes to AI, when it comes to critical minerals, defense. How do you keep those guardrails in place as you try to evolve the relationship? And do you think that the Chinese understand that there are limits to that relationship?
I do. I think it's very important about being upfront and clear. I think, no surprises, if you will. And I think the Prime Minister and President Xi had, it sounds to me like a very intimate discussion in the October meeting in South Korea, where it was really more about the relationship and that there are guardrails and that there are areas, lots of areas to cooperate on, but there are areas where there is going to be no cooperation, and we compete, if you will. But I think that was made very clear. I think the other thing we should just keep in mind, right, is we're a member of the Five Eyes. All the leaders of the Five Eyes in the 12-month period will have been in Beijing. New Zealand started last year. The Prime Minister in Australia has been a couple of times. Keir Starmer's going in a couple of weeks. President Trump's going. So, our Five Eyes, the sort of the security side of it, is engaging. We've been kind of the outlier, and again, for good reason. There's been anger and all, but I think it's time. We've got to have a relationship to be able to deal with issues. There are opportunities, but also deal with some of the challenges. So I was quite excited to see those mechanisms. That might seem like a boring thing to say, but I focused on that. Those 10 mechanisms being set up or revitalized is really important. And I think there's going to be a lot of work for our civil servants in getting those ready and up and running and kind of the dialogue going back and forth.
Well, overnight, we also learned that Canada wants to look at joint ventures and investments with Chinese companies within the next 3 years, with the idea, Dominic Barton, to build a Canadian electric vehicle with Chinese knowledge. Is that plausible? And do you think that from a security perspective, that's a good idea, to have Canada creating an EV industry with China inside Canada?
Yeah, I think as long as, one, it's going to create jobs for Canadians and have a supply chain in Canada, that I think it's something we need to look at. China is by far the leader in EVs. I think they produced 16 million EVs last year. And they have a number of companies that are BYD, Launch, that actually build entire, car systems in other countries. So Launch, for example, has built the Vietnamese automobile industry, and it started with a Chinese supply chain, but it has to move to a 100% Vietnamese supply chain over a period of time. BYD in Brazil is building. So there are ways to be able to make it work. I think on the security side, I defer to our security colleagues on how to do it. I think that's doable. There are a lot of Chinese EVs here in the UK, in Europe. One of those companies I mentioned is actually providing the electric vehicle manufacturing for one of the largest European automobile players, right? So I think as long as, again, it's creating jobs and supply chains within the country, I think that's something to be explored. And my read of it was this is a opportunity to be looked at and to see it. And I think there were some very good discussions that happened in Beijing with some of those players I've mentioned.
I'll just end on this. Obviously, part of this is in response to Donald Trump, right? This is about Canada trying to diversify trading partners right around the world. Do you think that this would have happened anyway, even without the threats from Donald Trump and the way he's trying to upend the sort of world trade system?
I do, because I think, again, for Canada, we're a small trading nation. We need to have relationships with some of the largest economies in the world, and that includes China, 18% of the GDP. It includes India. I'm very excited that we've reconnected, if you will, with India and the Middle East, and I could go on. Mm-hmm. So I think we would have gone this way anyhow. It's important to do it, but I think the current conditions, if I could call it that, have accelerated it. It's incredible what's happening, and so I think we need that diversification and resilience. And the good thing is it's going to create jobs and opportunities, and we have a lot to, I think, gain from it. But again, with the guardrails that are very much, I think, part of the strategic agreement.
Dominic Barton, nice to see you. Thank you for making the time. Appreciate it, sir.
Great to see you.
For canola farmers, the reduction of Chinese tariffs could not come soon enough. That tariff came into effect in August, hitting farmers right at the start of harvest season for maximum impact. The March 1st timeline to reduce tariffs means Canadian farmers will have some level of certainty now for planting season and planning ahead. Rob Stone is a Saskatchewan canola farmer we've spoken to before, and he joins me live this morning. Rob, we could probably call you our favorite canola farmer at this point, because we've talked to you a number of times through all of this. Now we're talking to you with a little bit of good news. So tell me, what was your reaction when you heard the news?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, good morning. It was a bit of surprise for me, to be honest. We're so used to having disappointment in this file that when you start seeing some progress, I was ecstatic to see some good outcomes happening. And I think the last time we talked, I'd asked for people to fix it. Well, we're starting to work on fixing it. So that's good news.
So not eliminated entirely, down to 15%, I guess, by March. What does that mean for you practically?
I think it's all about trajectory for me. We can see a thawing of relations. We can see the fact that we're returning to a more business attitude when it comes to our exports, including canola on our farm. And that's all good news. When it comes to the markets and all of those things, the markets, I think we're responding favorably to the presence in China all of last week. And I think without coming home with some good news last week, we would have probably seen some fairly significant problems in the canola futures markets last week. So that's what I'm seeing out of this so far.
Okay, well, remind people who haven't seen you here before what the impact has been on your farm and the pressure that this added to your work and how you survive out there.
Well, certainly, when you have your largest export customer for canola basically put prohibitive tariffs on, it affects the export business. It affects our ability to move canola off the farm. It affects our ability to pay bills, cash flow, all of those things that the crop has certainly provided to our farms. So when we had those sorts of trade issues developing, your mind goes to all of these different catastrophic places of how's our farm going to survive long term, and what's that going to mean for agriculture on our farm in Saskatchewan and in Canada. So a lot of uncertainty is really what that created for us, and with the expectation that we would start seeing some of these discussions happening now.
So as we talked about, I think the last time, this happened when Canada put the EV tariffs in place. Now Canada has lifted them and is going to allow 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into the country. And there was some upset about that. Obviously, the Premier of Ontario wasn't happy. There were a lot of auto workers and representatives not happy. When you hear that, what do you think? Because obviously there is a bit of a trade-off here.
Yeah, I think trade is all about trade-offs, isn't it? And
Sure.
I guess I look at this from my perspective that this is good for Canada. Canada is an export-based economy. Agriculture in general contributes largely to the GDP. Even canola, there's various different numbers that roll it up to a $47 billion a year industry when you count all the jobs and everything else. So it's a big deal. I have to advocate on behalf of ourselves and be glad that the government realizes that Canadian agriculture is a big deal and Canadian exports are really important to our economy. So there's always going to be discussions about all of the rest of the things.
Yeah.
I'm concerned with what has been going on in our industry and concerned with how we've had some follow-up with these political decisions in the past, and a resumption of normal rules-based trade is what's most important in our export economy.
When you heard this news, did you cheer? Did you pour another coffee? Did you pour a cocktail? What did you do?
I was at the crop production show in Saskatoon, so just recent industry meetings and everything else. So yeah, I woke up to the news and exactly that. Just scrolled through the phone for a while and started reading some positive articles and some positive reports on this, and just really quite happy with the collaborative approach that our premier and the federal government and all of the farmers and commissions were able to report on these resolving these issues. So it was just it was kind of that a little bit of a victory read when you're usually doom scrolling on the phone, it seems like these days.
Yes. Well, you were due for some good news, Rob. Thank you for always making time for me. I appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Anytime.
Okay, that's Rob Stone in Saskatchewan, a canola farmer, dealing with the good news this time. Coming up, the U.S. president isn't taking his eyes off of Greenland. Donald Trump now threatening tariffs for countries who stand in the way of the U.S. acquiring the Arctic territory. I'll speak to Canada's Chief of the Defence Staff about the role Canada could play and what she's doing to make sure Canada's sovereignty is secure. There's a lot more coming ahead. You're watching RBL. Donald Trump is doubling down, maybe tripling down at this stage, on his threats to seize Greenland for national security reasons.
NATO has been dealing with us on Greenland. We need Greenland for national security very badly. If we don't have it, we have a big hole in national security.
NATO allies, including France, Germany, Norway, and Sweden, have deployed small military troops to Greenland as U.S. threats persist. Earlier this morning, Prime Minister Carney was asked about Canada's role in the situation.
I have spoken to our European NATO partners, a number of them, Nordic NATO partners. I've spoken to the Prime Minister of Greenland, and there's a full commitment, not surprisingly, as is appropriate, of NATO partners to the security of Greenland. That's the right way to address this security.
General Jenny Carignan is the Chief of the Defense Staff. Nice to see you, General. Thanks for making the time. Happy New Year as well.
Happy New Year.
A lot has happened already into 2026, and I want to start with some of the threats that are out there and maybe are surprising new threats. Let's start with the President Trump saying that he wants to control Greenland at any cost. They've said that they are not going to rule out military force if needed, though it sounds like he'd prefer to buy it. How seriously are you taking those kinds of threats?
Well, I think our Prime Minister has been very clear on supporting the sovereignty of Greenland and Denmark in that way. And that it's over to Denmark to make those decisions. But from my perspective, we have a lot of work ongoing with both Denmark and the U.S. in terms of security arrangements, binational command with NORAD. Yeah. So we continue to work together for the overall security of our sovereignty as well. So.
Does it concern you in terms of how NATO is positioned if we have, threats might be too strong a word, but a NATO partner sort of contemplating taking over another NATO partner?
So, of course, this causes discussion within NATO. That's absolutely the case. NATO has been, around for 76 years. The alliance has gone some, bumpy times at times. Not all 32 allies will agree on everything all the time. Sure. So I think, we will navigate through this period of time with all of the allies around the table.
So you don't think it is at risk of a rupture, a more serious rupture, NATO, I mean?
So I think we really need to engage in not cut the communication channel and keep engaging together. Yeah.
As you know, the Danes are now bolstering their military presence in Greenland and asking some allies to pitch in. France is one of them. Are you working on a proposal to contribute Canadian forces on the ground if needed?
So we are always working closely with our Danish partner as a routine. At times they participate in our operation or exercises in the Arctic. Mm-hmm. And, we are working together in multinational brigade Latvia. Yes. Yep. So, of course, we are exchanging consistently on various opportunities. Many of them are already programmed for the future, but of course, we are always engaged in that way.
Is there one program for Greenland, or is that something that is now on the table?
So we know there are discussions in NATO to have specific missions that are more Arctic-oriented. So already with my Arctic Chad partner, which we call the Seven, mm-hmm. The 7 Arctic Chads, we regularly get together as well to consolidate our activities to ensure that from our perspective, things are aligned and we consolidate our activities and mm-hmm. also share for potential opportunities to exercise, operate, and conduct various activities together. And there's definitely a lot of interest in Arctic security from a NATO perspective as well, and then we will work together to do that.
Do you think an increased presence, military presence in Greenland is a message to Russia, to China, to the United States? What is the intent behind beefing up a military presence in Greenland in your mind?
Well, it's always about sovereignty operations, security operations. We act as we need to act as responsible actors sure. within our sovereign territories, and this is part of the demonstration that needs to be done all the time. So. this is only good news in terms of ensuring that our coasts are secure, our territory remains secure, and we also know what's happening up there.
Do you feel like we are at sort of a to use a word the Prime Minister uses, a hinge moment when it comes to Arctic sovereignty? And is Canada taking that seriously enough in terms of being able to defend the Arctic?
For sure. Like from my perspective, we have our defense policy, our North strong and free. It is very clear that our top priority is Canada's defense and the Arctic. So our policy was published spring of 24. So we have been hard at work in implementing. So it is clear that we have billions of dollars of investments in NORAD modernization, new radars, satellites, but also infrastructure going up in the Arctic, airfields, forward operation locations, northern operational support hubs. So all of this is ongoing. And what I would say is we have a persistent presence, Canadians in the North, as we speak. It's a combination of permanent infrastructure and presence. And then with that on top of it, overlaid a specific sovereignty operation for domain awareness and all of this. So all of that overlaid together, we pretty much have a persistent presence in the Arctic.
Given the Prime Minister's various trips to Europe, most recently you were with him for the Coalition of the Willing, talking about how to defend Ukraine. Is Canada realigning itself militarily and from a security perspective with Europe and away from the United States?
So we have always been working in an interoperable fashion with our European partners because, you know, as NATO members, we have to work together. And having been involved closely with our presence in Latvia since 2017, we work very closely with now 12 different nations in getting ourselves up very interoperable as we work together. Right. But of course, we share the continents with the Americans, and defending this is a lot easier doing it together. And frankly, we also have this this unheard of binational agreement that is more than 65 years old now with NORAD, working very closely in again, the defense and security of the continent.
But when you see the President make the incursion into Venezuela, talk about the sovereignty of Greenland, put forward a national security document that talks about protecting the Western Hemisphere, does it give you pause in terms of how we need to position ourselves in relationship to the United States in a different way?
So we are, of course, always engaged in those discussions. So when I say this, it's military to military. So the U.S. National Security Strategy is a whole of government document. They haven't published their defense security policy yet, but military to military, we are regularly engaged in discussion to, again, align how we are going to work together, what kind of exercise or interoperable operations we are engaged on both sides.
So in your mind, there's no reason to stop working that closely with the Americans?
On the contrary, we really have to keep those communication channels open to make sure that we understand each other. And again, in some cases we might disagree, but I would say military to military, those discussions are always ongoing.
Okay, quick couple of last questions. The F-35 fighter review is still pending. I have not heard that the Minister or the Prime Minister have made a decision yet. What for you is a reasonable timeline? I mean, I assume you would like to know soon.
Well, I mean, it needs to take the time that it needs. We want to make sure that all the facts are well understood, and so that the best possible decision can be made. But I think when the government is ready, they'll just make the decision.
General, thank you for making the time. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Rosemary.
When we come back, more on the deal with China, and this time how the agreement is going over across this country. Premiers in the prairies touting the deal as a win for canola farmers, while Ontario and the auto sector not quite as happy. The Sunday Scrum is standing by. You're watching Rosemary Barton live.
It's going to hurt every single auto manufacturer, every single supply chain that has anything to do with the auto sector. This was not thought out properly.
Can we address the real impact that we've already been paying on the ag sector here in Western Canada, while also putting together a plan to support the Ontario auto worker? I think we can.
I don't think we should go from the arms of one trading partner that has been problematic straight into the arms of a second one.
Reaction there from premiers and Conservative MP Michael Chong to the Prime Minister's announcement of the deal with China. Could this cause friction in the Team Canada approach to trade discussions? Let's bring back our Sunday Scrum. Sherelle Evelyn, the managing editor of the Hill Times in Ottawa, Emily Nicolas, columnist for Le Devoir in Montreal, and Gary Mason, columnist for the Globe and Mail, and he's in Vancouver. Good to see you all again. You know, when I was talking to my favorite canola farmer earlier in Saskatchewan, and I said, you know, what did you make of this? He said, well, in trade, there are trade-offs. And I thought that was quite astute, Gary, and that is sort of what we were encountering. I just wonder how difficult it will be for the Prime Minister to manage this, not just criticism from the Conservatives, but criticism from some parts of the country that feel that this wasn't the best move.
Yeah, well, there's a few things, Rosemary. I mean, I think, first off, the canola farmers were paying a pretty high price for a tariff policy on China that didn't really make sense. We were trying to protect this fantasy idea of developing an EV market here in Canada, and we were also helping the Americans. So, you know, it didn't make, they were sort of this, you know, casualty in this this tariff war that we were going along with, in essence. Secondly, I would say that, generally speaking, when it's like, okay, the East, Central Canada could lose if the West benefits, I think the West has been used to not winning that trade-off. So I think there's a bit of surprise here, a delightful surprise on the part of the Western premiers that this is the decision that Mark Carney took in this case. I just want to point out one other thing, though, Rosemary. I think it's important, and it's like the federal conservatives, they sort of don't know what to do around this issue. I mean, they seem to take their talking points to what Republicans in the United States are saying. And, there have been some, cabinet ministers and talking heads on Fox News that are saying that, this decision around EVs is a disastrous decision and we shouldn't be doing, this trade with China and deals with China. This is the same, the Trump administration signed a deal at the beginning of last year to sell advanced AI chips to China. And that was against the recommendations of security experts. The sale of these chips had been banned by the Biden administration. And now, we're supposed to be, now the Republicans are saying that, EVs, Chinese EVs in our roadways are going to be roaming surveillance systems and things like that. And the other thing is, quickly, China invested $2 billion in the first half of 2025 in the United States. And they invested $200 million in Canada. So, the United States speaks out both sides of their mouth. And I think we have to be very careful of adopting their, talking points, because often they make absolutely no sense at all.
Emily, what did you make of Doug Ford's reaction? Do you think it was fair, or do you think that it is normal that with things like this, we're going to upset some parts of the country and not others?
I think Doug Ford made sense in terms of Ontario politics, in the sense that the automobile sector in Southern Ontario is very fragile. It's also very much impacted by the trade war with the U.S. And there isn't much that the Ontario Premier can do, but being disappointed with everybody who's trying to do something so that he sounds strong about the issue.
Yeah.
So that's what I think he's doing. But when you look at the issue a little bit closer, the issue is, what then do you want to do? Because as long as Donald Trump is in power, we're not going back to an integrated North American automobile sector. And so the hits are going to be taken no matter what for Southern Ontario. And I think it's very convenient for Doug Ford to be saying that Mark Carney isn't doing the right thing. But I think it's a game of political blame shifting. I also think that when it comes to EVs in general, there used to be a time in Canada where we understood that energy transition was really important. It really helped when Joe Biden had the same belief, but it still is. Now we need to figure out how to get away from oil and gas in our transportation sector if you want to lower our emission. And so it doesn't have to be China. Here in Quebec, we've been trying to make some deals with a European EV battery sector, some of it not to great success. But there still is that ability. If we are shifting our focus away from the US, it also means something in terms of Canada's capacity to electrify transportation, even though the Americans do not want to. Yeah. And we need to figure this out as well, regardless of just the trade war. We need to really realize that this was actually a good goal that we sort of threw out with the bad water, and we need to actually try to figure out a way to get back to it.
Though if part of the goal, at least from the Prime Minister's perspective of this trip, was to find a way to make vehicles, electric vehicles here with Chinese knowledge, that might start to address some of those concerns. And Sherelle, the other point I would say regarding Doug Ford is there's also now reports that there is some more assistance coming to the auto sector. So I wonder how you were going to watch the government manage some of that frustration that we saw.
Yeah, I mean, it is always amusing to see Doug Ford chastising somebody else for what he calls a knee-jerk reaction. because I think we have seen that he is fairly capable of those himself. He has enjoyed essentially being, especially when it comes to Canada's relationship with the U.S., being, portrayed or seen as Captain Canada, and very much on the path of doing what's best for the country and getting lots of, acclaim and plaudits for that. So now that the conversation is shifting a little further away, where he doesn't have the same inroads in terms of getting on TV and making the case for Canada and Ontario, to kind of see it kind of get pulled out of his grasp a little bit, I think is interesting. And then what you said earlier, Rosemary, about further support for the auto sector, of course, we're hearing that that's coming. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the Carney government is able to essentially smooth things over, because of course there are legitimate concerns. Yes, there are things that are overblown, but there are legitimate concerns because this is an industry that has been incredibly hard hit, and everybody is on tenterhooks and not wanting to upset the apple cart even further, given how fragile the industry is and how badly Trump is basically decimating it. So yeah, I'll be looking to see, what is the Carney government going to do? We know that Dominic LeBlanc has spoken to the premiers. There's another First Ministers meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. And so the thing that the Carney government, I think, hasn't necessarily done well is keeping everybody in the loop and informed. And, the U.S. had a heads up about this deal. Did Ontario have a heads up about this deal? I don't know if we know that for certain. And so if that wasn't the case, then I think that there's a door there that should be, that the Carney government should be working towards, trying to smooth things over on that front, saying we're going to be really transparent about what we're doing.
You all gave very long answers, so I only came to you all once. I'm sorry. They were all very good answers, though, so I'm not judging you. Sherelle, Emily, and Gary, thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your Sundays. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rose.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Communications are starting to come back online in Iran following the Islamic regime's complete shutdown of the country's internet, isolating everyone there from the rest of the world. Officials believe now that more than 3,000 Iranians have been killed amidst weeks of unrest that marked the biggest challenge to the regime in some time. More on what it means for Iranians and their future next on RBL. Video coming out of Iran shows the aftermath of weeks of anti-regime, anti-government protests that led to an internet blackout imposed by the regime, cutting off Iranians from much of the outside world. What began late last month as protests against an increasing economic crisis morphed into countrywide general protest against the Islamic regime. Amnesty International investigators say that security forces, including the Islamic Revolutionary Guard and police, used assault rifles and shotguns loaded with metal pellets against protesters. Officials say nearly 3,000 people have been arrested, but there are estimates that it could be higher. Last week, funeral processions were held for civilians and security forces believed to have been killed during the protests. There is no official death toll yet, as I said there, but human rights activist news agency, a U.S.-based organization, says it's 3,000, though we have heard much higher numbers as well. For more on this, we're joined by Nazanin Afshinjam-McKay, an Iranian human rights activist. Nice to see you this morning.
Thank you, Rosie, for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. The Islamic regime is now rolling back the internet blackout that had been in place for many weeks, and people obviously desperate for information about their families and what's been happening. We're starting to get a little bit of a picture of that. What's the latest that you're hearing about how people are doing on the ground?
Rosie, it's a modern day massacre. The horrors that we're seeing from the video footage and pictures coming out is unimaginable. And as you know, this regime has been committing human rights abuses for the past 46 years, but we've never seen anything like it. The scale and level of violence, the method of repression. You've mentioned the number of 3,000 deaths. That was just found in one warehouse alone, where bodies were stacked pile on top of each other. Kids, elderly in body bags. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah. The numbers we are receiving is that it is upward of 20,000 people that have been massacred, if not double that amount. Wow. News is just trickling in. So this is just the general vision that we're seeing.
Yeah, and I mean, that's part of what the internet blackout is supposed to do. Not only, of course, limit information, but also hide what's happening to people on the ground. So I appreciate you bringing that up. The Iran Supreme Leader is now pointing the finger at Donald Trump for the deaths in the country. President Trump has come a little bit closer, I think, to calling for regime change. There is a carrier strike group moving towards the Middle East. What do you make of the rhetoric from both sides, and where do you think this is going to go in terms of U.S. involvement?
We have no idea, because at the beginning of this, Donald Trump, President Trump, had promised that if there was any kind of killing, that he would come to the rescue, or that the United States would intervene. Then 20,000 deaths later, nothing happened. Then there was a back and forth between Ayatollah Khamenei and Trump, and as you said, there was some backsliding where Trump kind of gave an opening for diplomatic relations. But I think because Ayatollah Khamenei has now accused Trump of these deaths, Trump has called for a new leader to emerge. He said it's time for the Islamic Republic to have a new leader.
If that were to happen, how would things unfold? It seems very, just changing a leader does not necessarily mean the whole regime collapses. So what will you be watching for in terms of movement from the United States? How important would their action be into seeing this actually happen?
The Iranian people have been calling for intervention. They are tired of words of condemnation. They've been asking European leaders to step up and act with, cutting off trade relations and crippling this regime. We're hoping that the world actually comes forward and enacts the responsibility to protect doctrine, which specifically says that when a sovereign country can't protect its own people or is massacring its own people, then it's the responsibility of other nation states to come to the rescue. And so short of that, there's not much that can be done. So we are counting on President Trump and other foreign leaders to fulfill their promises and to come and to remove the leadership and to target the IRGC, their command and control, and give a chance at the people who have been fighting now for 46 years to be free and establish a democratic Iran.
We have seen movements like this before, uprisings, moments when Iranians tried to take back their country, to your point. Do you think that this moment is different in any way? And if so, how?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we've had protests all the way from the start of 1979, student movements in 1999, then the 2009 uprisings, and of course you know about the 2022 Woman Life Freedom Revolutionary Movement when people rose up in the hundreds of thousands. Now this time they're saying it's likely that it's in the millions that people came out on the streets, and people had really hit rock bottom. It was both the fact that Iranians couldn't even afford really bread anymore. They were reaching a water shortage. There was electricity shortages, and just the level of repression, the persecution of ethnic and religious minorities, journalists being jailed. It's a succession of repression over this many years. But this time, the level of violence used on the people, where we believe they were being called to shoot point blank, where they're going into hospitals, hunting for the people that they've injured. The IRGC are going and abducting them or shooting them. And it's like scenes that we saw back in Rwanda during the genocide.
Nazanin Ashmanja-McKay, Iranian-Canadian human rights activist, thank you so much for your time. We'll speak again, I'm sure.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Doha right now, Doha, Qatar, but he leaves for Zurich tomorrow, where he will attend the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos. Over the next couple of days, he's expected to meet with business leaders and investment leaders in an attempt to, again, still try and diversify further Canada's trade in the world. It's been a busy weekend. We thank you for spending part of your day with us, and I'll see you back here next Sunday, if not before. Have a good day.